For we are like tree trunks in the snow. At first sight, they appear to gently rest there, and you would say that a slight push is enough to move them. No, that will not work, as they are firmly tied with the ground. Although, surprisingly, even that is just a perception. The Trees, a tale by Franz Kafka.
Particularly when we come to forests, the meaning of climate change is very crucial.
We have a dramatic increase in temperature. We have also an increase of extreme weather events.
New pests, new diseases, mostly from the south, and we realize that it's not in random, it's driven by warming.
We lose recently in central and north Poland about 9 million cubic meters. It's a big disaster. It's never happened before.
There was falling a lot of trees, then sometimes we don't have so much seedlings we need.
If you see, for example, animals, they can move, they can spread, and in that way escape climate change. Plants have a problem. They can't move, at least not as fast.
Climate change already takes its toll. For example, we have already experienced heavy losses, mass mortalities in our forests, so it's getting be urgent. It gives task for us to solve, but it's not the end of the story.
And of course, bark beetle problem is the final consequence. It means that really we are under the situation when condition for the forest start to be a little bit critical. And when we are eliminating this power of biological pumps, we are eliminating the possibility of biosphere to absorb atmospheric carbon dioxide. And it's a really very serious problem. We have a lot of different scenarios of the development of the climate, but problem is that the changes are really very rapid. For example, during the last 5 decades, we are recording increasing number of climatic extreme events, not only the floods, but drought. For example, now we really have a lot of problems with the deficiency of water.
In the last 100 years, the global temperature increased about 1 grade Celsius. And with this change, we are facing 2 huge extreme events. So the worst scenarios are talking about the even increase about 6 grade Celsius, which probably no one from us can imagine what could happen when the worst scenario will be fulfilled. This gasometric system measures the amount of CO2 uptake by the plant, so we can estimate how much carbon is stored within the plant. So what's the problem? The soil doesn't have any water from the winter because there was no snow, and during the spring there were no precipitation. So now the tree should solve such a big problem, how to uptake the CO2 and at the same time not to release water. On the surface of the leaves there are small guard cells called stomata. Due to the stomata, they uptake CO2 for the photosynthesis they need, but they also release water. And in order to spare the water, they close the stomata, but at the same time they close the way for CO2. So they are not able to create new cells. They have also a lower amount of the substances they are used for the defense against the biotic stress factors. So they are more vulnerable to insect or to fungi. It's a simplified way for bark beetle to attack trees under the severe event of drought.
In climate change, you actually would expect that the tree has some problems in the most southern area of its distribution, so maybe in Morocco, because it might get too dry. And interesting is that these species now has some serious problems in its most northern distribution, because there is a new fungi coming in which creates serious problems for our foresters to maintain these forests and these species in some regions. And now the people who are managing this forest, they think about, hey, what can we do? Do we have the wrong seed material planted here? Should we get seed material from more south? Or should we find seed material which is resistant to these fungi? These are very beautiful trees here. I like them very much. I have one of them in my garden. The full title of the project is Sustainable Utilization of Forest Genetic Resources in Climate Change. And the idea behind that is that our forests, they harbor such a high diversity, a very high diversity of different tree species, but also a high diversity of genetic variation within the trees. So we have, let's say, silver fir grows from southern Italy until Czech Republic. So that's a species which is on the one side adapted to Mediterranean coast, but on the other side to harsh conditions in the Bohemian mountains, for example. And this huge variation in adaptation needs to be preserved for the future. And we can preserve this genetic variation only if we use it.
There's not only a big problem with drought, but at the same time there's a lack of reproduction material. So the seed sources are lacking and the people who are responsible are basically not able to obtain a good quality reproduction material. So this is a big source of concern. Gene diversity will be the most important part of the story, so to say, if we want to somehow mitigate the impacts of climate change. Other ways how we could maybe slow down or mitigate the climate change could be the assisted migration, but it's definitely still a big question. Assisted migration means that you help the trees to expand the range towards north, for example, to support more or less the natural course or development of expanding the species range along the gradient of climate change.
With the help of scientific modeling, we are suggesting the transfer of forest reproductive material along the main environmental gradients. that are influencing the adaptation of these populations.
There are different needs of importing material. I talked with different people from nurseries. Some are really anxious to get external material to improve the availability of foreign provenances. Others are really strict and think, no, we have these rules. These rules have worked forever. Why should we change them? Why should we import new things that we don't know? If we can overcome these boundaries and exchange material between the countries, that would improve the situation.
Slovakia is a mountainous country. When we were first thinking of adaptation measures to climate change, it seemed we will be self-sufficient except of the lowermost areas. But now we realize that it's not true, at least partially, because we'll need genetic resources from southern areas which are more adapted or acclimated to warmer and drier climates. And we also recognize that we may be, despite of the small size of the country, a valuable source of genetic resources. In practical way, it's the forest reproductive materials for our neighbors, especially from Poland, maybe also for the Czech Republic, for other mountainous areas.
In Austria we have the growth areas, and we have the recommend to use the seedlings from this growth area in this growth area. But if there is no way to have so many seedlings we need, then there is a way to get seedlings from the neighbor country. But we have to argument a lot why it is necessary, why there is no other way to get others. But it's not possible in the other way. We can't transfer seedlings from Austria to Hungary or the other countries.
The nursery system is different in Poland than in other countries. There is state-owned nursery, so they produce for own purpose, not for trading. So it's in some case not open market. That's why it's not fully understand and fully use this assisted migration.
All countries in Europe have an own national directive based on these European-wide legislation. For example, all countries have seeds on delineations, but the basis behind these seeds on delineations is completely different. Some countries use biogeographic zones, some other countries use administrative boundaries, which have nothing to do with the natural occurrence of the species and nothing to do with the local adaptations of these species to climate conditions. Main problem is that all these legislations have been installed in the past when climate change was not such an urgent issue. So the legislations are still have these paradigma, local is the best in mind.
The foresters are really conservative people. It's not a problem. It's a kind of adaptation to their work and subject of their works. So it's not a problem, it's just a situation.
One of the main benefits of this common project is that people from different countries can sit together and discuss why we have these different rules. In Prague we are responsible for Norway spruce, and our database consists of tens of thousands of entries.
Our aim is to collect the knowledge which is already available, but which is available at present only on the national level. And we want to compile this knowledge, bring it together, and see how we can use it for transnational cooperation. Besides addressing the policy issues and legislation, we also want to make the forest practitioners, the forest managers, the forest owners aware of the problem and tell them how the right forest reproductive material, the right seeds and seedlings can help them with adapting to forest to climate change. And at the end of the project, we're developing a smartphone application.
A person who is going to use this app can, for a certain location in Europe, find out what would be the vulnerability of 7 tree species that is commonly occurring in Europe, like Norway spruce, like European beech, European larch, the pedunculate and the sessile oak, Scots pine and so on. So first he would test if this particular tree is going to occur or grow and reproduce in the planting area or not, and where should we get the seeds or the planting materials so that under future conditions the forest is stable.
I combine the output from the 7 species together to see for each specific area what is the probability of presence of each of the species. So here it's only for the present, but we will do it also for the other time period, 2041 to 2060, 2061 to 2080, and 2081 to 2100.
This application is already available on my mobile phone. You can see the seed zones and you can get the information about these zones and display the attribute data. And of course you can turn off and on different layers, turning on the satellite.
Currently, some of the big players, big owners, they have the reproduction material at their own hands, so to say, under control. And that's, for example, military forests. Military forests operate their own seed orchards, progeny trials. They can also get the seed sources, collect the cones. They can take care of the seedlings in their own nurseries, and then they can come back with that good quality reproduction material and put it back to the forests.
Divize nám dávají plán zhruba na 5 let dopředu, takový předběžný plán, co by se asi mohlo sázet. Samozřejmě, že nemůžou kopírovat skutečnou potřebu, protože to, co se stalo třeba loňský a letošní rok s kůrovcem, tak před 5 lety nemohli vědět. Na to musíme reagovat my a to je právě výhoda krytokořenné sadby, kterou jsme schopní vypěstovat za 1 rok, že když se něco takového stane, tak i ten další rok jsme schopní na to zareagovat.
Řekl bych, že sbíráme plody našich předků, kdy na místech, která se nehodí pro výsadbu smrku, byl ten smrk vysazován. Žádná monokultura nedokáže odolávat ať deficitu vláhovému, ať škůdcům tak dokonale, jako je les i uměle založený, ale blížící se určitému přirozenému ekosystému.
Adapting forests under climate change and utilizing genetic variations is being discussed worldwide. For example, the state of British Columbia in Canada, they have a system in place which aims for assisted migration of the species, but they would respond to change and slowly move to a place which is conducive for their growth, reproduction and survival. But these processes would take time, and the climate change is too fast, and therefore it needs that the human beings assist such a change.
One possible problem for assisted migration might be if the projections, which is the basis of the decision how to transfer seeds or material from southern areas to northern area, perhaps are wrong. So it could be, for example, that you have decrease of precipitation and the projections of precipitation have a high uncertainty. And because of this, it's important not to rely on only one species, but to also to rely on a mixture of species, and also to have something like a diversification of the risk among different tree species. So one point in silviculture is also to practice assisted migration, but on the other hand also to increase the diversity of tree species, that at the end you have more than one or two candidates for the adaptation to future climate conditions.
The nature may find a solution by itself. The problem is that we don't have time for it. We need the forests, we need healthy forests. I mean, if we let nature do what nature wants, simply it may happen that some species disappear or some provenances disappear. Other provenances will come, other species will come. However, humans will have the problem because we are in need of healthy forests where we can produce goods for our needs. And if the forests are not healthy, during all this process, things change, and these changes are the problem in the end.
Well, as the environmental conditions change rapidly, we could still plant maladapted trees. That is not an issue. The problem is that they will become maladapted for the times to come, and this will create a huge problem.
Every country has to produce own rules, but it's now really the time, if you think about climate change, which is really a continental or a global problem, to collaborate and harmonize the rules to make seed transfer and assisted migration possible. For this we need the scientific information. This is our task, but the task also for the politics is also to harmonize the rules for seed transfer.
In the long term, there is a change of legislation necessary. So it will certainly not be possible to go on with the present legislation for the next 100 years. So our project idea is to make policymakers aware of the problem and to provide possible solutions, and then to discuss with them what could be the next step and how this solution could be used.
If you cross the border of a country from one country to the other and you look at the trees, they don't look different. So a spruce at the one side of the control checkpoint and the spruce at the other side of the checkpoint is exactly the same spruce. Nature does not know these borders.
I don't think that boundaries need to exist. That's just in your head. I mean, if you think you need to be concerned to a different subject or to a different field or to a different country, yeah, do it, you know. But it's just in your head. What